everyone, my name is Alicia Jackson, licensed professional counselor, and welcome to my channel. Today we are discussing the window of tolerance, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of internal family systems, as I am an IFS therapist. Now, if you are new to this channel, welcome, and if you're returning, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get started. So we're going to, again, talk about the window of tolerance, and we're first going to define it. And this is a way that we conceptualize and really talk about our capacity that does vary of our ability to handle and manage intense emotions, our ability to be with them, our ability to sit in them, okay? And we're going to talk about this again through the lens of internal family systems, okay? And so we have different ways that our system helps us to manage and tolerate intense emotions. And we're going to talk about those today. They're broken up into two different groups, hyperarousal and hypoarousal, and we'll define those as we go along. First, we're going to talk about hypoarousal. And so once our body, our system gets the signal that we are experiencing something that is too big, the emotion is too intense for our capacity, right? It starts to develop methods and ways to calm down, right, or shut down our nervous system and our body so that we can be able to tolerate the intense emotion or stress that's happening in our lives. So for an example, some things that you might experience in hypoarousal are feeling numb. When our body or our brain starts to numb our feelings, right? Or exhaustion. Sometimes our body is sending a signal that we're maybe emotionally tired, which feels different from being physically tired. That is a way that our body is shutting things down. Our body is saying, this is too much stress. We need to shut down. Let's just sleep. Or even depression. You're having a hard time being motivated, again, because your body is trying to shut down. And this would also be categorized in the freeze category when we're talking about how our body responds to distress, trauma, or stress, where it says, okay, we don't have the strength to run or fight, so we're going to just shut down and freeze. Some more examples of trauma responses or parts, that's the language we use, internal family systems, in the hypoarousal category is disconnection, dissociation, sleep, complete overwhelm, feeling unsafe or hopeless, zoning out, shame or guilt, disconnection from the mind and body, feeling numb or heavily fatigued, desire to just stay in the bed or to be asleep. Here's another one that sometimes is easily missed, where you're running on autopilot, right? So you're running on disconnection. You don't even realize that you're disconnected because you're just on autopilot. This is when you're just checking the list, you're checking the errands, you're getting up in the morning, getting the kids to school, you're going to work, coming home, making the dinner, going to bed. You're on autopilot, you're disconnected, but you don't realize it, right? Because again, it's impacting your awareness. Or, of course, being shut off or shut down. And so we know in internal family systems, right, that these parts start to do these important jobs to help our nervous system and our body to feel calm, to be able to tolerate heavy, intense emotional responses. It develops these methods, these strategies at very young ages, okay? And so if we are experiencing stress and de-stress and trauma at very young ages, if our window of tolerance is small, the chances are that we have more, right? We have more strategies that we're using to help us calm down our body, right? Our body is constantly in a state of hyper or hypoarousal because of the ages in which these strategies manifested, right? And that's why in internal family systems, what do we say? No bad parts, right? Because these parts are actively working to keep us safe, to help us to survive our environment. if we have experienced an environment that is very emotionally charged, where our younger self felt unsafe, right? If we broke the rules, what would we do? So we had to always follow the rules, or it depending on whatever mood the adult who was caregiving us, it was unpredictable. So we had to, right, be on alert at all times to protect ourselves. These are methods in which, right, we have learned to take care of ourselves. And so, while at times, man, parts of us can have really strong opinions about these parts of us that have these strategies to help us, right, manage these intense and tolerate these intense emotions, know that they were only doing this job because, again, our window of tolerance, right, it's either too narrow for us to manage it, and it had to step in. It had to step in to help us. Next, we're going to talk about hyperarousal. Okay, so these are responses that are typically associated with stress and trauma, right? But they're all parts, and parts again that our nervous system and our body had to develop and strategize to come in and say, hey, they need some help, I need to step in. And so some examples of that are some addictive systems or addictive behaviors, whether it's self-harm, panic attacks, sensitivity, irritability, anger, or rage. Physiological stress responses. So these are when you're having tightness in the chest or maybe nausea. You're having moments where you're dizzy and dysregulated. You're not able to maintain your balance. These are physiological responses that, again, our body is sending us signals that, hey, we're not okay. We're not okay. You need to do something fast. And again, this is when our body is sending us signals that, hey, we are outside of our window of tolerance. We've had enough. And it's sending you signals. Hey, hello, trying to get your attention. Oftentimes we are trying to stop or shut down the signals that our body is trying to send us to say, this is too much. But really, we need to be listening and leaning in to understand why they are showing up. That is why I am so grateful for internal family systems, because we know oftentimes when clients come into an office, they're saying, hey, I'm having panic attacks and it's getting in the way of my work. Or, hey, I'm yelling at my children or my spouse or my partner, or I'm even internalizing, right, anger towards myself, and I need to stop this. I need to stop this, right? And instead, what we do in internal family systems is we get curious about why these parts, these trauma responses are here, because they're here for a reason, and they have good intentions. They're here to let us know you're outside of this window of tolerance. This emotion is too intense for us to be able to manage at this time. You need to leave, stat, right? But understanding that, again, that through the lens, these parts have, again, information from the age and stage in which they started doing this work. And sometimes they also don't realize how old we are currently, right? Sometimes they're still stuck in the space where the tragedy happened or the trauma happened or the distress happened, or sometimes they're at a later stage in life where something very similar occurred. There was almost like a re-triggering that happened, and so sometimes they're in that space, and so we have to update them, right? So they're functioning most times on information about where we were, not where we are. Not saying that we need to ignore them, because that is not what we're saying. We need to attend to them. We need to acknowledge them. And at the same time, it's good to have a framework of how and why they're responding. Other examples of hypoarousal trauma responses or parts are people-pleasing, can be, again, self-harm, can be impulsivity, over-responding, controlling behaviors, fixing behaviors. These are, again, responses, and they're usually responding, as you can hear, through the lens of fear. Okay? We're outside of this window of tolerance, so you need to you need to act. Or, as we heard in hypoarousal, we are outside of our window of tolerance, so our body shuts down automatically, oftentimes, shuts down because it's saying, we can't handle this. And that's why it's so important for us to build our relationship with our protectors so they will be able to have access to us and so they won't have to work so hard. And once the unburdening happens of the parts of us that experience those things and took in some beliefs about us and emotions, right, that come with those experiences, once they're able to be relieved, then these trauma responses, the hyperarousal and hypoarousal, they will start to decrease. And our window of tolerance will expand. It will become greater. And so there are strategies that people use to widen their window of tolerance: deep breathing, exercising, right? Things to help connect them back to their body and to also engage the senses, right? To help us to become more aware of what we're feeling, what we're thinking. Because oftentimes when we are in hyperarousal or hypoarousal, as we've talked about in other videos that are dealing with self-awareness, it is hard to attune to what we're feeling and thinking at that time. So ways that we can build that window of tolerance, right, is stopping in the moment, slowing it down, taking a breath, checking our senses, moving, just engaging our nervous system so that we can have more access to ourself, to us in the now, instead of those younger versions of ourselves. That's who's showing up when we're outside of our window of tolerance, okay? And so inside of the window of tolerance, it's very similar to the self energy that we describe in internal family systems. You have the calm, you have the centered, you're able to feel and trust the ability for connection and social engagement, right? Outside of that window of tolerance, engaging with others can be taxing and scary and dangerous. But inside the window of tolerance, you're able to trust your ability to connect with others. Inside the window of tolerance, your body is settled. Your heart isn't beating fast or at a very low rate. You're feeling balanced. You have access to love, compassion, and empathy, right? And so oftentimes, and you've heard me mention this in previous videos, right, when we're talking about the parts of us that are holding anger, usually they are speaking from a place that lacks compassion, right? Because they don't have access to it, because again, they're up here and the window of tolerance is down, further down. And so when we're inside of it, we do have access to that compassion, right, to be able to help us and assist us with connecting with ourselves and others. Inside the window of tolerance, we have the ability to self-soothe, to take care of ourselves, to self-regulate. There's more contentment. And again, remember, we have access to our true self, our self now, and all those resources that we have developed, right? And that wisdom that we have now versus when we were experiencing those things when we were younger, right? Those younger parts of us don't have the information that we ourselves have. Now we'll be able to gain access to that information to be able to respond from a centered place. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some science. We're going to dip into some science because the window of tolerance is definitely connected to our nervous system, our parasympathetic nervous system, okay? And so when we talk about hypoarousal, this is when our body goes into I can't, right? And it is a dorsal vagal emergency state, okay? So our body is shutting down. So what happens when our body is in this state of hypoarousal, that our fuel storage increases, meaning that oftentimes this is where disordered eating can happen, right? Our insulin increases. Also, our endorphins that help us to numb pain or be able to raise the threshold of our pain level also increase. Now, what decreases in the dorsal vagal or hypoarousal state is our heart rate, blood pressure, our temperature, muscle tone, Facial expressions. Oftentimes, when someone is in a hypoarousal state, they have a affect. That's the word we use to describe us therapists. But your facial expression comes pretty flat, very flat, and oftentimes too, the eye contact is very limited. Your eye contact may go down or look to the side because, again, you're in this state where your body is shutting down. What also decreases is intonations, attention or awareness to the human voice also decreases. Social behavior, sexual responses, and also your immune response decreases in the dorsal vagal state. And so, thinking about this, when we're in hypoarousal, this is impacting so many different areas of our lives, not realizing, again, how our parts and our strategies that we have as tools to help us manage these intense emotions are also directly connected to what our body is telling us and our physical health. So next, the sympathetic, which is categorized as fight or flight. This is the hyper, right, arousal state. And in this state, what increases is the blood pressure, our heart rate, fuel availability, the adrenaline. It's running, it's moving fast. So that oftentimes you're moving and you're grooving, not realizing maybe how much pain or stress you're in because you're just used to running on this adrenaline at all times. This is when the fight or flight mode, when you're used to, unfortunately, functioning in a space that's maybe more chaotic and distressing than others. And so when people tell you that maybe what you experienced was stressful or traumatic, you say, no, it's not. This is just what I use. This is what I deal with everyday life. I just am always in survival mode, right? Because you're running off of this adrenaline. This has been increased because you're in this fight or flight stage. What also increases is the oxygen circulation to vital organs, blood clotting, and pupil size, right? So our eyes begin to get a little bit more wider, right? Because we are in this space of hypervigilance, right? We have to be aware and be on the watch and looking at all times. And so our body's kicking in to help us to be able to respond in fight or flight when we have to be able to protect ourselves or when we have to be able to get out of there. Now, what decreases is our fuel storage. And this is oftentimes, again, where disordered eating, you may be more inclined to not have an appetite. Your insulin activity also decreases. Your digestion, being able to process your food, which may also lead to other intestinal issues. What also decreases is our relational ability, the inability for us to show up for the people in our lives and even for ourselves. We cannot forget the relationship that we have with ourselves. And what also decreases is our immune response. So notice that in both the hypo and hyperarousal, that there's a decrease in the immune response, which is going to again lead to us being more sick and being more susceptible to maybe viruses or things that are showing up in our environment. And so now what happens to our bodies when we are inside that window of tolerance, when we are in that ventral vagal state? This is in our sweet spot, when we are able to maintain and tolerate intense emotions. What increases is digestion, right? Our intestinal mobility increases. Resistance to infection and immune response also increases. So we are able, right, to fight off any disease or any viruses or sicknesses that may be around us. Rest and recuperation, that is also an increase. And what also increases is the circulation to the non-vital organs, which is referring to, for an example, your skin or your outer extremities. Oxytocin, which is very, very helpful, especially when we're engaging with others, when we're receiving hugs and embraces, that oxytocin is released. And it's often, again, when we are in social interactions that are without fear, right? without fear of rejection or fear of being awkward or fear, right? So we're in a space again where we're able to trust ourselves to be able to connect, and we're connecting with others, and you get this boost, right, of oxytocin, which can be so beneficial. And we realized how much we needed that, especially when we're going through that thing that started in 2020 that forever changed our world, when we didn't have touch and we weren't able to maybe console each other after a loved one passed or after a loved one lost their job. We weren't able to give them that embrace, or we weren't able to receive that. We realized the difference. We realized it. And also what increases is our ability to be able to relate and connect. Now, what decreases is our defense responses. Now think about that. The parts of us that we've been talking about, those strategies that we've had to use to survive throughout our lives, those parts that are functioning when we are in hyper or hypoarousal state, those decrease because we're in our window of tolerance. We're in our self energy, right? Again, through the lens of internal family systems. And so, why is it so important for us to know about window of tolerance? Well, it helps us to understand ourselves a little bit better. Again, to lean into our awareness of ourselves so that we can get curious about why these parts are here. I wonder, like, oh, I'm always cold. I thought it was just maybe because I'm anemic. Or maybe it's because you're in hypoarousal state. Something to get curious about and see, which also we have access to when we're inside of our window of tolerance. We have space for openness and curiosity instead of judgment and criticalness, right? Which are coming in spaces usually when we are in hyperarousal state, okay? And so it's really, really important for us to know for ourselves when we are in our window of tolerance and hyperarousal and hypoarousal, and to be able to decipher, okay, what happened that I'm responding in this way? My body, okay, I noticed that I just want to lay in bed all day today. Am I tired or is something else happening? Okay, I noticed that whenever this person comes around, my heart starts to beat fast, and I get like my chest gets tight, and it's hard for me to breathe. Okay, what's happening? What's coming up for me? Time to get curious about it. Time to understand why our body is showing up in the way that it is, so that we can build a relationship with it. Because we only get one body, we only get one system, and our parts are always working so hard to protect us. So, best to work with them than against them, because they're working so hard to protect you. Let me know your thoughts about the window of tolerance, and if you are still with us, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And as always, be cool, be calm, be centered.